we're going to be talking about baking powder, which is an ingredient used in many recipes such as bread, rolls, cakes, cookies, and tons of other baked goods. So first, to understand how baking powder works, you first have to look at baking soda, which is a key ingredient in baking powder. Baking soda, as you know, is sodium bicarbonate, which is a base. And whenever it comes in contact with an acidic ingredient such as brown sugar or vinegar, a chemical reaction occurs and CO2 is produced. Now, to make baking powder, what you have to do is combine baking soda, which is a base, and cream of tartar, which is a common ingredient in baking powder, and it is a dry acid. And what's interesting about this is whenever the baking powder, which is created from these two ingredients, comes in contact with water, a reaction is produced. No acidic ingredient, no wet acidic ingredient needed, and it produces CO2 and it raises and lightens the batter. This is why recipes calling for baking powder require you to bake it immediately so that it can be as light as possible. And next, we are going to be making our own baking powder out of baking soda and cream of tartar. Welcome back. We are going to be creating our own baking powder out of baking soda and cream of tartar and comparing it to actual baking powder. So what I'm first going to do is I'm going to take a half teaspoon of cream of tartar, which, as you may remember, is a dry acid, and we're going to be mixing it with 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda. And we're just going to mix that together. Now we're going to move on to the baking powder. So I'm going to get 3 1/4 teaspoon of baking powder out. And now we're going to see what happens when they react with water. Now we're going to test to see the differences between the baking powder we created with cream of tartar and baking soda against the baking powder that came in a can. So now I'm just going to add a little bit of water. Oh, you can hear that. You can hear that. You can't see it, but got bubbles creating that CO2, and we can see a little bit of bubbles in the actual baking powder. And from what it looks like, the baking powder that we created with our baking soda and cream of tartar was more effective and was a lot quicker at the reaction proceeding to create the CO2 bubbles. Okay, next we're going to be baking cupcakes. We're going to make one cupcake with baking powder and the other cupcake without baking powder, and then we're going to see how they compare. We're back, and I didn't want to take you through the whole process of making the cupcakes because that would have taken a really long time, but here are the results. This is a cupcake that was made without the baking powder, and this is a cupcake that was made with the baking powder. This one you can see is a lot denser, and it's not nearly as risen. And this one's a lot lighter and fluffier, and you can see it's significantly taller than the other one. So through this, we're able to see just how much baking powder affects a recipe. Because I know I'd want to eat this cupcake more than this cupcake. And this is a cross section of the two cupcakes. This is a cupcake that was made without baking powder. This was a cupcake that was made with baking powder. Through our studies of baking powder, I hope you have realized how many awesome properties it has and how it's really beneficial to the baking world.